Plato's political philosophy, Collectivism, and the Philosopher-King. 3 classes of men. Men in whom reason is dominant, philosophers. Men in whom the spirited element is dominant, soldiers. Men in whom the appetites are most developed, the masses. The myth of the metals. Some are born with gold in their souls, philosophers. Some are born with silver in their souls, military. Some are born with iron and brass in their souls, the majority. 3 types of men, innately determined by the kind of spiritual metal that makes them up. Plato does not hold that it's hereditary, but that it is innate. The question of politics for Plato is, who should rule? Answer: the philosophers. They are the only men of reason, the only ones who know the form of the good, who know what's right and how to act. Just as reason has to rule in the soul, so the men of reason, the philosophers, have to rule in the state. Just as reason must have unlimited power in the soul, philosophers must have unlimited power in the state. Ruling is a specialized art. How can we open this up to untrained, uneducated, ignorant masses? Virtue is knowledge. The masses don't have virtue and don't have knowledge and, therefore, can't conduct themselves virtuously. Is it safe to trust philosophers with absolute power? Yes, because they have absolute knowledge, and therefore, they cannot misuse their power. Knowledge guarantees virtue. Why not let each man rule his own life by his own reason? Because, in Plato's view, it is impossible for most men to live their own lives rationally. This world is unreal, true knowledge is otherworldly. Most men are this worldly, they're incapable of a mystic vision. Conclusion: most men are incurably irrational and helpless to live by themselves. Therefore, we need a rule by an authoritarian few who have specialized knowledge. Mysticism leads to dictatorship, irrationalism leads to statism. A 3-class society exactly parallel to the individual soul. The philosophers, when they are in charge, the state has the virtue of wisdom. The military, when they have properly performed their functions, the state has courage. The masses, their primary virtue is temperance, which in this context means obedience. When the 3 classes are following their proper functions, the state will have the right division of labor and the right harmony, and that will be the virtue of justice. Since these philosophers know the good, they have lost interest in everything that could tempt them to abuse their power. But just to make sure, we'll deprive them of all private property. Suppose we had constructed such a Platonic state, have a whole entity unto itself, with all the parts of an individual human being all together functioning as one entity. This view is known as the organic theory of the state, the view that the state collectively is a separate and distinct organism, and that the individual has the same relation to the state that a cell has to the body. Metaphysically, individuality is not real. We are all simply varying reflections of one entity. In politics, the collective is real, the individual is illusory. This is the philosophic basis of collectivism in politics, full collectivism being the view that the group is the unit of reality and of value. What is your political obligation according to Plato? You must live for the welfare of the state as a whole. As a Greek, Plato is not exclusively an altruist. But qua Platonist, Plato is an advocate of the view that individuals should live to serve the state and should systematically sacrifice themselves in their personal happiness. What is the ideal? That the private and individual be altogether banished from life, and the things which are by nature private, such as eyes and ears and hands, have become common. Plato. What is Plato's attitude toward private property and private concerns? Disunion comes about when the words mine and not mine and another's and not another's are not applied to the same things throughout the community. The best ordered state will be the one in which the largest number of persons use these terms in the same sense, and which accordingly most nearly resembles a single person. They will not rend the community asunder by each applying that word mine to different things and dragging off whatever he can get for himself into a private home, where he will have his separate family forming a center of exclusive joys and sorrows. Rather, they will all, so far as may be, feel together and aim at the same ends. Plato. Now, that is a formal and explicit advocacy of the exact view of man and of society that Ayn Rand dramatizes in Anthem. The idea is for men to form one unit with all goods in common. In this respect, Plato is the father of communism. Plato regarded communism as ideal but as impractical applied to the masses because the appetites are simply too strong. Nevertheless, the true philosophers live that way. They have all property in common and all wives and children in common also. There will be yearly mating festivals among the philosophers. The oldest, most senior philosophers will mate the ones that are eugenically best to produce the highest breed. Won't the guardians, the philosophers, be unhappy living this manner of life? Our aim in founding the Commonwealth was not to make any one class especially happy, but to secure the greatest possible happiness for the community as a whole. Plato. You see the complete collectivism of the Platonic mentality. Individuals are simply unimportant. What counts is the group. What areas of man's life are the guardians to control? Everything. Education must be thoroughly controlled by the state. We must have a thorough-going censorship of literature, music, philosophy, and science. We will tell people lies, so-called noble lies, lies that are for the good of the people, as and when it turns out to be necessary. All careers are to be controlled completely. The board of philosophers assigned to vocational guidance will determine your ability and assign you to the job where you best fit the state, regardless of your desires. In general, it's complete totalitarianism. Plato's philosophy has been the blueprint ever since for dictatorial totalitarian schemes of every variety. People who don't like totalitarianism but accept the altruist collectivist viewpoint to say, we shouldn't have this kind of society, it would be good, but it wouldn't work. True, it wouldn't work because of the ethics and the metaphysics underlying it. It's based on an anti-life otherworldly ethics. Plato was the first one who said it wouldn't work. What's good in theory doesn't necessarily work in practice. When we theorize, we are focusing on the world of forms. We couldn't expect that our theories are going to work perfectly down here in this world. That dichotomy between theory and practice has led to two kinds of men. The self-declared practical men, who despise theory and the intellect. The self-declared theoretical men, who despise practice in the physical world. Both sever the intellect from life, and that is a fundamental Platonic contribution. The truth is that it would not work in practice, because the theory on which it is based is defective, opposed to reality. But for that you need a different metaphysics and epistemology. A fundamental similarity. Sophists, no standard to resolve disputes among men, force. Plato, truth is accessible only to a privileged few, force. What about the possibility of a philosophy that would provide the foundation for a third alternative? Neither subjectivist skepticism nor otherworldly mysticism. Was there one? Yes. Aristotle, a philosopher for living on earth.